Okay, I want to take just a couple of minutes to show how to turn the knob for the box that we're demonstrating. That's the part from here up. As I mentioned earlier, there are three pieces to the box. There's the body, there's the lid, and there's the knob. What I normally do is I match the knob to the lid. Doesn't mean you have to do it, but that's how I do it. In this particular case, both of them are maple, and since I'm trying to match this knob, this is about 1.25 inches high. So all I do is take a piece of hard maple. Obviously the outside dimensions have to be at least as large as the diameter of the knob. This just happens to be the dimensions of the wood that I have. It doesn't need to be this big. There are many ways that you can do this. What I typically do is turn them on a bottle stop mandrel. That's the easiest way that I have found to do it. It's quickest. You put the bottle stop mandrel in the with the Morse taper in the headstock. You always put a drawbar on it to keep it from drifting out. And I also bring the tailstock up for support just in case I need it. That may be overkill, but it's easy to do. Have to drill a hole in the block to fit it on the bottle stop mandrel. And the hole sometimes will vary in size depending upon the type of wood that you use. If you're using a softer wood, you can get by with one size drill bit. If you're using a harder wood, you typically have to use a larger drill bit. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult to get it on and to get it off. So now that we've got it on, what we're going to do is we're going to round it off. And once again, you can see that I'm turning with my body. My hips are pushing this through. There's none of this is locked against my side. My hands are not moving on the tool rest. And I want to get it down to round. And I want it to get down to the dimension, which is the outside dimension of the top, which I've already set my calipers for. I can see I've got to take about 1/8 of an inch off each side. That's about the dimension that we need. So now we'll take it, we'll turn it round the whole way across that dimension, or that diameter. And we're ready to shape this knob now. And you can pretty much do this whole thing with a roughing gouge. Just lean into it with your body. And this is just, once again, hard maple. It's a spindle orientation, which means the grain is going this way, parallel to the ways of the bed, of the lathe. And you can see you can get a fairly smooth cut with a roughing gouge. Move that up just a little closer. That's the bottom. Finish off the top. And if you want to sand, you can. I would probably sand it just a little bit to take these black marks off, but it's smooth. It really doesn't need to be sanded. In terms of the bead that I like to put in the top, unfortunately, there is no drill bit that fits this bead. So I typically turn them out with a spindle gouge, which is really a fairly easy thing to do if you've done it a couple of times. Take this off so we don't get poked in the elbow. I've already measured the diameter of my bead with my dividers. I just want to mark it. The tool rest is at 45 degrees. My fingers are on the tool rest. I'm holding this. I'm just touching one side. That's where I want my hole to be. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring this out so that I'm perpendicular to that. I'm going to take a spindle gouge. Flute is straight up, and I'm just going to push it in. And once it goes in, I'm going to rotate it to 90 degrees and just pull it off to the side. Pushing it straight in works just like a drill bit. I'm going to turn it, and I'm pulling it straight out. You get a nice ribbon. And I'm paying attention to how big that hole is because I don't want to shoot past the bead. Right now the hole should be too small. And that's a good thing. So we'll try to creep up on it a little bit more. And you can kind of come in at a 45-degree angle right at the top, because if you overshoot it, then you can just turn that top away. Still a little too small. Okay, I've got the hole the right size, so now we can take it a little bit further to depth. Sometimes it's easy to get sloppy and push it in at a 45, and if you do, it'll slide. So remember to go in straight up. Okay. We've got that nib in the middle, which is preventing it from going in the whole way, so we'll take that out. And that is the right size. It's a little snug, but you want it a little snug. Any questions on this? And now comes the hardest part of this, getting this off the mandrel. Sometimes I have to use a pair of water pump pliers to get this off. And then what I will do with this to attach it, so you can see this one's a little wider than that one. There's nothing that says it has to be a certain size. I mean, this is a good, I've been using the cookie jar analogy. This is a good cookie jar lid. I've got a hole in here that matches this. I've got a hole in my lid that matches this. I'm just going to turn a very small tenon that fits into this and the lid, glue them together with the tenon, put either a drop of epoxy or a drop of silicone into that, push this in. Don't put so much epoxy or silicone in that it's going to squirt out on the sides, but also do not use CA glue. CA glue is brittle, and if somebody drops it, it could conceivably crack and the bead could fall out. So any questions on turning the knob? Okay, we're going to work on the lid for just a minute. Obviously, to start with the lid, you have to have the base done. And this isn't completely finished, but it's finished enough to the point where we can work on the lid. The lid needs to be at least as big as the base. I know that sounds pretty basic, but try not to take anything for granted. I like to overlap it just a tiny, tiny bit. And you can see that with this. I think you can see there's a little bit of an overlap. I think it looks better that way. Shadow line. That's perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start with this, and I'm going to set my calipers to just a little bit bigger than that, and that's going to be the outside diameter of my lid. And to start with that, I've cut a piece of maple blank, which is just a little bit bigger than that. And all I'm going to do is jam chuck that. I've got a center mark on it, so I know where the center is. And I'm just going to jam that up against my chuck. Okay. And as Jack Morse and Harvey Myers say, they've never lost a piece of wood like this. And in the 4 times I've tried it, I've never lost one either. So what we're going to do, we'll use the face shield for this. I want to mark this. I'm going to turn my speed down, turn it up. And that's moving, that's traveling pretty true. I want to mark it. This is the top. That's a good question. And for those of people like me who are sometimes challenged to remember those things, there's nothing wrong with writing top and bottom on it. In fact, the blanks that you have, some of them have tops, written bottom, bottom. Some of them are written maple, some of them are written cherry. When you're dealing with a lot of different things, sometimes it's hard to remember all those things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a bowl gouge. We used a spindle gouge on the top, but the grain orientation was different. The grain orientation is this way. Never ever use a roughing gouge on this to turn this away. A bowl gouge is a safe way to do it. And that should now be round. It's nice and smooth. There's no torn grain. It's nice and round, but it's the wrong size. It's still too much in diameter. We still need to take about 1/8 of an inch off the whole way around. And we'll do that in 2 passes. You're looking at the shadow line on the far side to see where you are. That's my first pass. There's my second pass. Now what I want to do, and you can see once again there's no torn grain, it's very smooth, but this is a freshly sharpened tool also. By the time we finish this, it won't be the same situation. So what I want to do is I want to start by turning a little tenon on the top, And that little tenon will eventually be that elevated part in the center of the lid. This, and I should mention, this is how I do this. This doesn't mean this is how you should do it, but it works well for me. So I'm going to put this up here, and that's where my tenon's going to go. If you put your pencil on the top of the live center, that should be about 2 inches, which is what a standard 2-inch chuck is. That works well. So all I want to do now is just turn this slope on the lid. That's all I'm doing. And making sure I've got a nice tenon there for my chuck to grab a hold of when I turn it around. So we'll start by nibbling some of this away. And once again, you can see almost all of the cutting action is with my body, my weight shifting towards the center. And as we get closer to the center, I want to move my tool rest. I want to clean up my tenon. I want a nice square tenon. Right now you can see it's kind of curved up in the middle. That's not what we want. And I'm going to clean that up with a spindle gouge. Just go straight in. That looks pretty straight. I'm going to square it off. I want to clean this up just a little bit, but this is in my way, so we're just going to flip it around. This is in my way, we're going to flip it around. And that really is ready for sanding. There's no torn, well, there's a tiny bit of torn grain there. We're going to clean that up a little bit, because I know we don't like to sand. Okay, and for those of you who are in the center, you can kind of see the nice curve. Very little torn grain. What's there will easily sand out. And when we're done with this, this will eventually be rounded over and will become part of the top. But right now it's a tenon. So what we're going to do, and you can see that held. Well, nobody caught it. So, but all that was held is just jammed against this. So we're going to put this in here. Okay, the first thing I want to do is I want to decide what the thickness of the lid should be. You can see there's a lot more wood than we actually need. To use the lid, or to make a lid, I recommend that you not use 3/4 wood, because you wind up with a really flat lid and you really don't get any elevation. 6/4 is a good start. Unfortunately, very few lumber yards sell 6/4, so there are two ways you can do this. Either you can take 2 pieces of 3/4 and glue them together, and that'll turn out just fine. Or you can take some 8/4 if you have it laying around and just waste some of it. And that's what this piece is. So I'm going to bring this up just for a little support. I'm going to waste it down so that the outside is about that thick, about 1/4 of an inch thick. Just the outside though. Don't take the whole thing down or you'll lose this recess that you need, or that tenon that you need. And that's where the glove comes in handy, because it is hot. Okay, now I've got the outside thickness of the lid that I want. So the question becomes, what's the diameter of the inside, the recess that's going to fit down? Because that's how far in I want to go. So we'll get the calipers out again. And this is the part that we're measuring now. And it's about that. So we're going to measure that. You can see we've still got a little go. Plus I intentionally left this a little oversized on the outside. So we've got that to work with also. And I'm going to work up to this just to see how it is. Because if I've underestimated, I'd rather underestimate early on than when I'm actually done. That should still be a little too big. And it is, which is good. That should be the size that we're looking for. The reason it's doing that is because this doesn't have a straight wall on it yet. So let's put that on and see how it fits. And you can feel it moving. That's the kind of fit you want, what we call the cookie jar fit. So we know that's the right diameter, so we can take that down to this lip right here. Okay, and you can see the outside diameter is about 1/16 of an inch around, too big. So we're going to take that off right now, clean it up. round it over just a tiny bit. You can either do that with your tool or you can do it with your sandpaper. Doesn't matter. Some people feel comfortable with a tool, other people don't. Still too big. Take some more off. And that's about the right size in terms of diameter. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to waste some of that away because we don't need that big of a tenon. It's just extra weight. Okay, we've gotten rid of that. Now I want to dome it a little bit. Just once again, it looks a little nicer and it takes more weight off. And to dome it, think of this as a bowl. You're going to make a shallow bowl. Normally when you make a shallow bowl, we've got to get this out of the way. We're going to start on the outside. And we're going to work our way in, just like that. Because what we want to do, you probably can't see it, but because I was pulling it out just to hog it away, there's a lot of torn fibers in there. You don't want torn fibers because you're going to have to sand them away. And I don't care to sand. I suspect you don't either. This is a lot smoother than what it was before, so we'll go in for maybe one or two, maybe three or four, let's see. Start with the tip. One more cut, just there's a couple of ridges. I don't know if you can see them, but you can feel them. Ideally, I'd probably go to the grinder one more time but we won't do that. sure you got a good footing. This is a nice light finishing cut. Try to minimize the amount of sanding that you have to do. Come right to the center. And that's the inside. So you'd want to sand that, sand the top, sand the bottom, round this all off. And what I would have so now what I've got to do is I've got to finish this. And there are a couple of different ways that you can do this. You can either use a Longworth chuck, you can use a jam chuck, you can do whatever you want. And we're going to do the easiest thing we can. We're going to jam this up against that, and we're just going to take that off. But I think to do that, I'll probably open these up a little bit, just to give me a little more support. You notice I've still got my center mark on that. Keep your center marks as long as you can, because I guarantee you once you take them off, you'll find that you need them. So what we're going to do with this is just an old mouse pad. When you jam something, always put the center in the center mark first so that it self-centers itself. Hopefully when we turn that on, this will run true. So let's see. That runs pretty true. If it's not running true, you got problems, because when you want to try to match this up to that, trust me, it will not match. So we're going to go in there and clean that up. Just take that off. You can use either a bowl gouge or a spindle gouge, whatever you feel comfortable with. Now's the time to sand it, to finish it. When you take this off, you've still got, once again, your center point. You can now take this to a drill press if you want. Just lay it flat, drill a little hole, the same size that you drilled for the knob, or that you're going to drill for the knob. Cut a little tenon, glue them together. You got a lid and a knob, and it fits the base. Any questions? And that's looser than you would normally do something, but the reason I did that, you always have to say that was part of the plan. It's maybe a tiny bit too loose, but I have fit these lids. This is all kiln dried lumber. Some of this has been laying in my shop for years. And I used to leave just a little bit. Now some of those lids don't fit anymore. So even if it's kiln dried lumber, when you take that center mass out, it will move. especially when you're introducing liquid glue, water in the glue, it will move. So leave more than you think might be necessary. That way the lid will always fit on there. You won't have to turn it a certain way so that it does. You had a question.
Since that's hard maple, and I know that my Nova chuck, I can chuck into a 16th recess and hold it.
Mm-hmm.
I would put a decorative recess on the inside of the lid and be able to hold it and turn it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel more comfortable doing that than the way you just did it. But since you're putting the knob on top of it, you're hiding your last little cut there, so you don't have the issues on the top. But I know you don't like leaving the visible.
Oh, here?
recess. Yeah.
Yeah, this goes back to a conversation that we had at the last meeting. And his question was, do you have to turn this away so that it looks like that? And my answer was no, you do not. Different people have different ways of doing things. I prefer so that I eliminate all evidence of how it was chucked. But if you're doing something that's oiled, that you may need to re-oil at some point in time, if you leave the recess on the bottom, you can always chuck it back up and re-oil it. I have seen pieces for sale, and I've seen pieces in galleries before where this recess was still there. But when the recess is still there, normally what they will do, and I think this is what you're talking about, they will remove this centerpiece, maybe put a decorative ring or two in there, maybe even put some rings around it, so it looks like it's part of the intended product. There's nothing wrong with that. The only thing you do have to do, though, is make sure you curve the whole thing in a little bit so that it sits flat. But you do not have to take the recess off. If you wanted to leave that square on the top instead of rounding it, you could do that too. You had talked about bringing some, I think, a texturing tool in. If you wanted to texture around that and maybe put a burn mark on the top and the burn mark, that'd look really good. The fact that I'm doing it this way doesn't mean that that's the way you've got to do it. Plenty of different ways to do this.
Rick and I were at a gallery up in Blue Ridge,
Mm-hmm.
and some of Mahoney's work was there and Dick Sing's, and both of their work still had the recess in the bottom of it.
Yeah.
I thought it was strange for them, but
Well, I'm not. I've seen Dick Sing's name in print. I've never seen him demonstrate. I have seen Mike Mahoney demonstrate. Mike, I think he himself would tell you that he's more of a production bowl turner than he is an artistic type turner. I mean, I've seen a lot of work that still has the recess on the bottom. So I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying this is the way I like to do it. So
well, I
yeah,
understand. I do
yeah,
it both ways.
yeah.
Especially in hard maple, it doesn't take much of a recess. So.
Well, and I'll be honest with you, this is probably one of the very, very few projects I've ever used a recess. I normally use a tenon. And the only reason I'm using a recess here is because I know I've got to undercut the bottom a little bit. So if I cut a tenon and cut all that outside stuff away and then have to recess it some more, I've lost a lot of my potential depth on the inside. And one thing I did not show you, and I'm not going to show you today, is after you're done hollowing the inside, obviously you need to do to the bottom what you want to do. I haven't finished hollowing it yet, which is why I don't want to take this off. But what you can do with that, you've still got your chuck, you've still got your mouse pad. The mouse pad fits right in there. You've still got your center hole, or your center mark. Once again, don't take that off until you're absolutely sure you don't need that. It's on there tight. It should turn true, but let's see. That turns pretty true. Now, you can go in there and you can either take that out or leave it on. You can undercut it. You can put rings. You can put texture. And really, if you're gonna do a real nice piece, you probably do want to put some decorative rings on the bottom. You may want to put some decorative rings either on the top or maybe on the underside of the top, or texturing. I mean, this is a pretty plain lid. I mean, it's nothing fancy about it. There are a lot of things you can do with it. Yeah, this is an example of Mike's lid. Let's look first at the top. You can see it's
soft maple, so it didn't cut his textures.
He's got some grooves cut here, here, and here, and then this is all textured in the middle. And then on the underside, he cut some grooves and he textured that also. And this is really, you know, I've sat through, I think, well, I've sat through demos with a lot of people, and a lot of demonstrators will tell you that if you're going to do a lid, whether it's for a big box like this or a little box, you really should be doing something on the inside, and you should be doing something on the outside. This is more of a utilitarian type lid.
Most on the inside, I think, is a surprise. The outside just kind of depends on it.
Especially, yeah, and I've actually seen people, and I've done it before. I've embedded jewelry on the inside. You know, you saw me cut a little recess for this, and actually, I've seen beads of courage boxes where the bead was inside instead of on the outside. But I've also seen little decorative boxes that had a little recess with a jewel stuck in it. Well, I'm sure, I don't think it was a real jewel, but it looked like a jewel. You know, we had Jane Burke last week. I've seen people put marquetry on the inside, or the Don Russell 6-sided star. I've seen that embedded on the inside of lids as well as the bottoms of boxes. So to Mike's point, you not only get a nice box, but you open it up and wow, there's a surprise inside. That's kind of neat. So yeah, don't overlook those things. This is just a utilitarian. You know, the fancy thing about it is it has some burn marks on it, which it really isn't that fancy at all. But it's still a nice box. But there are some things like this that you can go above and beyond and really make it special. Any other questions? Good questions. Okay. Thank you. Okay.